questions. I'll do my best to answer them. This has been something that I've had an interest in due to some health issues that some of my kids have had, that I've read multiple books on nutrition and trying to help my kids over the years. And so this has been something that has been a continually learning process, and I'm still continuing to learn. So there's probably things that you know that, raise your hand, please share. Because I would like to learn from you. I don't know it all. So, and then, I don't have a degree in nutrition or anything, so that's going to be my disclaimer here. But I was asked because I constantly am telling people, oh, did you know? And sharing my information that I do have learned over the years. So there are certain treasures, they call them treasure 1 through 13 in here, that we're going to kind of go over. And the very first one is the treasure of storing a variety of grains. And so we're going to kind of start at this end and hopefully end up off at that end, but we'll see how all this goes tonight. So because most people will have wheat, rice, powdered milk, sugar, just some basics kind of in their diets, maybe some legumes. But when we're trying to build a powerhouse food storage, we want to venture into some new grains and store them and know how long they store and why they're good to store. Now, some people have problems with wheat, and so some of these gluten-free grains have a shorter life shelf than, say, wheat that's good for 30 years or more. So if you have problems with wheat, then you'll be exploring some of these other alternatives out here. So here we have a quinoa, which is an ancient blend. I like getting organic. It is a little bit more expensive, but the reason is because a lot of pesticides are very high in estrogens, and it's really messing up our endocrine systems and some functions in our bodies and hormones and stuff. So if you go organic, you're going to be lessening some of those estrogens that we're exposed through in plastics, in the environment, in pesticides, in our clothing. I mean, we are absolutely immersed in estrogens. And so any way that you can start eliminating as much as that if you can is good. So I try to go organic where it's most important. One of those things where I would start with anyone would be your fresh produce. If you're going to start organic anywhere, do your fresh produce there. Then kind of step up to other ones that you can. But basically what we want to do is we're starting with what people normally have, just wheat and rice, and it's usually white rice, and we want to upgrade. We want to look for something that's a little bit better than what we had before, starting with. Now, this is another one. You can find things now, because it's becoming more popular, finding things that are already sprouted, that they can be stored in number 10 cans. This was something I bought at Costco, and it's all your sprouted, bean mix. And, the one thing about sprouting is it's taking a bean or grain, and it has potential in it. And so it has a smaller amount of nutrients. But when you sprout it, it increases the nutritional value like tenfold or more, depending on what you're sprouting. So when you're trying to make your food storage more nutritionally dense, because guess what? The more nutrition we're getting in our food, we eat less, and we're going to weigh less, and it's going to cost less. And so having these things, when these things catch your eye, pay attention to them at the store. If it's in a dry form like this is, it can go in a number 10 can and be stored for long periods of time. Because when they're sprouted and they're dried at a low temperature, those live enzymes are still intact. And the nutrition is higher and it's retained in those kind of environments as well. Here we have green lentils. So these things are needed in our diets so that we have our proteins, our amino acids, our phytonutrients. There's just, your minerals that you need, your omega fats. A lot of people don't understand that even your green leafy lettuce has omegas in it. So they're in smaller amounts, but they're still there. So when we have our wheat at home, then we can do sprouting. And when we're sprouting, it's very, very simple how to do. And one thing about YouTube, if you ever want to know how to do something, I always go to YouTube and you'll see all kinds of videos on it. But you take a small amount of grain, it'll probably be about this much, it's really a small amount. And by sprouting it in 3 days, it'll fill up this whole jar. So not only when you're learning how to sprout, do you take a small amount of food, now you're multiplying how much food you have by a great amount, and you can feed more people with it. Plus, it's a lot more nutritious. So in a time of disaster, when there's shortages in food, sprouting is your garden in your house. And then the nice thing about it is that it's not going to be exposed to pesticides, and you're kind of going almost organic right in your jar. So how you sprout, just very simply, is in an evening, you'll take your grain, say wheat, or it could be your sprouted whatever here, or not sprouted, but your organic whatever, kamut or whatever you have here, and put it in there, and then you fill it up with water. And I always use the best water that I have available. And then you switch it around for a second or two, and you just set it on your counter. Real simple. And then the next day, what I do is I'll take a larger canning jar, and then because this has little holes in it, and depending on the size of the grain, they have different sprouting jar lids. So like for your big beans, you'd have something like this, and then for your finer seeds, you'd have something like this. And then I'll take the water that's in here, and I don't throw it away because it is full of nutrients in it. We have a question here.
If you put the bean mix in a number 10 can with an oxygen absorber, does it kill the ability to sprout?
It can have an effect. Not all of it will sprout, but I know people who can their wheat and then they sprout. They'll get a pretty good amount of sprouting with that. It won't be 100%, but you can put oxygen packets in it. But one thing that I choose to do, so I'm not putting the oxygen packets in it, it's called diatomaceous earth. And it looks like this, and you want to get food grade quality, and you can get it at animal feed stores by 50-pound bags? I mean, like for what, $25? And it's very high in silica, but the thing about the diatomaceous earth is when the stone is crushed, it makes like shards. So like insects, it penetrates them and kills them. And yet for us, because it's food grade, it won't affect us. So you can actually sprinkle just a small amount of this in your number 10 can. And when I say small, we're talking like half a teaspoon or whatever.
So there's the beans and the diatomaceous earth.
Yeah. So, Dave here had done his bean mix and grain mix here. And it's all mixed in there, but you can't see it. You don't want to have enough in there that you're eating diatomaceous earth. I mean, the idea is just to keep the insects and stuff down. Then you don't have to do an oxygen packet in certain grains. Now, certain ones, if you want to store them for a short amount of time, because of their maybe higher oil content, you can put an oxygen pack in it because the oxygen does kind of break down the oils. So it kind of depends what you want to do there. So, any other questions? Okay. So then what I do with that water that has been soaking overnight is I pour it into another cup or jar, and I go water my house plants, and they just, I mean, it's the nutrients that they are just loving. And they will grow like crazy. They'll be so beautiful. I'll go out to my fruiting trees, and I'll water. Even that little amount has so much nutrition in it. You can take it out in your garden in the summertime, and you can water your garden with it. If you have an herb box, planter box in your window, water it with this water that's coming from your grain. Then what you'll do is you'll rinse your grain, so you put more water in it, you'll swish it around, and you'll pour it out. And what you don't want is to put them in the sun, direct sunlight, so you want to put them on the counter off to the side. But you don't have to put it in the dark, but just not in direct sunlight. And then you want to tip the jar. Now, this here, David Robinson brought, is a sprouting tray where he has his grains here. And you can put them on your counter, and then the excess water will drain out. If you don't want to buy one of these, you can do the poor man's method that I kind of do is I'll just take a paper towel on my countertop and lean it against the tile backsplash. You want air to be able to flow up into here so you're not having problems with mold or anything, but then it can drain. You don't want your sprouts to sit in water. And then you just leave them for the day. Then at night, you take it, you rinse it out, you're swishing them around there with water, pour it into a glass. Again, there's still all that nutrients that are coming off the grain. And go water whatever plant that you want, and then you dump all that water out, then you let it sit overnight, and you'll start seeing the little roots that are sprouting, these little buds that come off your grain, and you know that your grain is good, it is sprouting. They typically say that when the root gets the length of the grain, it's at its optimal peak of nutrition. If you go too much further, I've done this where I've been busy and all of a sudden I realize that I'm actually getting green sprouts of the wheat itself. So you don't want to go that far because your sprouts are going to start tasting green. Now, one thing that I do with my sprouts is I can put them in burritos. People put their lettuce, tomato. Well, add your sprouts. You don't need a ton of them because they're so high in nutrients. Another thing I do is I will sprout and I'll have, just see how much is in there. If you're just doing some pancakes in the morning for like say 4 people or something, I will take that amount and then I will puree it in my blender and then add it to my pancake mix. And then it's just all that extra nutrition that's in there. And then too, when I'm making my homemade bread, I will have some sprouted grains as well, and puree them, add it to my bread dough mix, and then you're just really increasing your nutrition in your bread as well. So there's all kinds of different ways. Some people just like to eat them. I know I had some friends over in the summertime with their kids, and I had a mix here that's a multi-grain mix, and the kids just absolutely loved them. So the mother asked me what grains I had all in there, and she went and ordered them and added her diatomaceous earth, and now she does it for her own family. So some people think that kids won't eat this stuff. Their bodies are starving for this stuff just as much as ours are. So really it's how you present it and how you put it into the food so that they start become accustomed to these things as a normal everyday occurrence. Okay, there's other grains that we can talk about. Chia seeds, this is another real superfood, and it also is really good for its omegas. It's, as you get older and you're worrying about your bones and not getting osteoporosis, it has all the really good nutrients to keep your bones nice and strong. It's just really a powerhouse, and you don't need very many. So what I do with this is I will take a sports bottle and I'll put like 2 tablespoons of chia seeds in this big 16-ounce sports bottle. And then I'll fill it up with water, and then I'll just swish it for like a minute, maybe 2 minutes, until you start seeing it get like tapioca and they're not all clumped together. And then I put it in the refrigerator, because when you're eating your chia seeds, you do not want to eat them in the dry form, because they absorb so much water. If you're taking them into your digestion, and all those little rib pockets in your digestion, they're going to sit in there. So you always want to have your chia seeds hydrated. And then there's a drink called chia something. But it's at the health food store, and it's expensive. Do you know what I'm talking about? What's that called? Chia what?
I don't know. I've seen
But
it
it's really
there.
good.
Yeah.
It's almost $4 for a small bottle.
Right.
But you can make it for pennies by doing this, and then just juicing yourself or getting a nice naked juice or whatever, and then adding that to it is just wonderful. I introduced my sister with all of her little tiny kids around the house, and they were asking their mother, can I have more of that? And so now they all have it in their home all the time. So chia seeds are a real powerhouse for nutrition, plus your omega fats that you need for every cell in your body needs to have healthy fats just to even make the cell membrane. And then not only for our brains and for our livers and all the things that we need, these healthy fats are just really critical. So being able to hide things that the kids don't see, I mean, that's one way to go about doing it. Another thing, we'll hydrate these and put them in smoothies. And another way to get nutrition and vegetables into kids' lives is to hide them. We started our kids off really young with what we call green smoothies, and we'd be putting cucumbers and spinach and zucchini and chard and beet tops. And I mean, these things that are just really high in nutrition, very high in potassium, kale, and then you put blueberries and bananas in with a little almond milk, and they think they're having a blueberry shake. They have no idea all this other stuff's in here, like chia seeds and whatnot. So you really become a master at hiding things until they're old enough to say, oh, that's always been in there. So chia seeds are awesome to have. Another grain is kamut. It is an ancient grain that, one thing I read in this book here that I didn't realize is that this is one of the grains that you don't really say you have to buy it organic because that's the only way they grow it. I did not know that. So I continue to learn things that I didn't know before. But it is a larger grain, and it has less gluten in it. Some people have gluten sensitivities, and then depending on how bad it is, it goes to celiac disease. So if you're looking for something that has less gluten protein in it, the spelt is a good one for that. Another things that we put into our storage are the seeds. And this is sesame seeds. This is your highest form of calcium per teaspoon in anything that you can have. And so again, you can sprout these just a little bit the night before. You would just use the very finer one and add them to your smoothies again. There's also a vitamin called vitamin T, as in Tom. And there's only 3 substances in the entire world that have it. One is grubs, which I don't think we'll ever eat those, and termites, and then sesame seeds. So another reason to have variety of different kinds of grains and seeds is because not every single one of these is going to have every single of the same nutrients. So some very, rare nutrients will be in some of the other ones. Yes.
I noticed you have those in jars. Have you done your process of pulling the air out, or did you just?
I just put them in here just for today.
For tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, but how do you can those, or say sesame seeds? Did you buy some in bulk, or you just?
When I buy them in bulk, because they last so long, and you don't need that many.
Yeah.
I only have so much at home.
Yeah.
And when you buy them in bulk, one thing I don't buy a lot of is because sometimes there's little critters in it and they can start multiplying. So by buying a little, I can keep an eye on it to make sure nothing's like living in it. And then I know it's good, and then I know I can store it for a long period of time. Yeah.
I came a bit late, so maybe you already addressed this, but do you keep those in the fridge, and if so, what's the shelf life?
No, I don't keep them in the fridge because they're a seed and these are grains and all that kind of stuff. But after you get done sprouting, like that jar that went around and it's right where you want it, you can slow down the growing of it by putting it in the refrigerator. And then in the wintertime, sprouts don't sprout as well. So I typically do that in the spring and the summer and going into the fall. So every grain has a different shelf life. And it has a shorter shelf life the more omega fats that are in it. Like flaxseed, that only has like a couple year, shelf life. So, I don't buy a lot of it. And you grind this with a little coffee grinder, because if you were just to put this in your smoothie or a salad, they just go right through you. You're not getting any nutritional value. You actually have to grind, some seeds, and this is one of them. And, you have the golden ones, and then you have the dark ones. They're about the same in their nutrients and stuff. So another thing, snacks, I store sunflower seeds. My kids love them. They are good in vitamin E. Men particularly need this for the reproductive organs and whatnot. So raw's best, but when you're storing things and whatever the kids will eat. The other thing about the seeds is that you can get them in the low sodium now, which I really like. So you're not getting your sodium, potassium levels out of proportion, which is real important, because you always want to have more potassium than you do sodium. In the South American diet, it's reverse. So they have problems with high blood pressure and stuff, and so they put them on a low sodium diet, which is not healthy. You need to just increase the potassium that you're getting in your vegetables, and then that balance is restored. Okay? And then just nuts. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about nuts here. There is an enzyme in nuts, some nuts, almonds are one of them, I know, that they are an inhibitor enzyme. And what they're doing is, because they're in a shell, they need this enzyme to break out of the shell. And this inhibitor inhibits us from absorbing the nutrients in the nut. So you can learn about soaking your nuts, like almonds, in the refrigerator, just in some water, like overnight, drain it, and then eat your almonds. But a lot of people just don't do that. But it all depends on how healthy your intestinal tract is and how healthy your villi are. Because those little fingers are what are absorbing the nutrients out of the food that we are eating. And if we're having problems with grains, those are getting destroyed until you're getting starvation. That's what happened to my son. Was he had the big bloated stomach, and he was Ethiopian skinny, and he wasn't growing. And the doctor told me there was nothing wrong with him. And I was just through a lot of prayer and stuff that the Lord pushed me this way into nutrition. So that was kind of one of the reasons why I started looking into this kind of things. One thing I want to talk about before I forget, and I forgot to bring it tonight even though I had it prepared, is bone broth. And bone broth is amazing. And it's one of those things that we have stopped doing, is eating the whole animal. I'm going to go to my email, because they're on one thing I do is I love science, I like the nutrition, is I will watch documentaries and presentations by doctors and stuff about different nutritional things. And this one came up, and it was about bone broth. And the nice thing about bone broth is when you make it, is that you can can it, and it can be shelf stable, and you can have it. And then you don't have to go buy this expensive stuff at the store that they're doing it and they're just putting a name on it. So if you just get back to nature and do it the way it was supposed to, then this is what you want to do. But bone broth, there are benefits. One is when you are cooking your grains, when you add the bone broth, it will increase the quality and the digestion and absorption of the grain proteins. And the reason for that is because the villi, if they are shrunk or damaged, this bone broth, because of the protein sugars in it, go in and heal those villi. And then, so that's one of the reasons there. Bone broth in and of itself is not high in nutrition, but it packs a powerful punch in its high amino acids such as glycine, proline, and glutamine. Okay, so we need proline to make collagen for our skin, hair, and nails, and cartilage for our joints. Glycine is an amino acid that makes other amino acids. So you see that chain of that we need to keep in place there. Glutamine in bone broth heals your gut or your GI tract from leaky gut syndrome. You need it for healthy growth of the villi in your intestines that absorb nutrients from our food. It stimulates our immune system, and it's needed to build muscles. Bones are made up of 50% minerals, and that's another thing we're going to talk about here, is the importance of having minerals in our diet, and then also in our gardens. And then 28% is collagen and 22% water. Bones have calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, silicon, sulfur, and trace minerals in very small amounts. By adding vegetables to your broth, it will increase the nutrients in your broth. So you can get on YouTube and learn how to make bone broth. And there's different kinds of collagen. So you can make a chicken bone broth, and then you can make a beef bone broth. And those are the two that I have. And when I make them, you can either can them or you can put them in your freezer. So if you're making gravies or soups, you can always add that nutrients into the food for your family. Okay, so those three, go back up here and tell you those again. The glycine, proline, and glutamine. They are the building blocks for bones and are collagen fibrils. These form a lattice work for calcium, phosphate, and other minerals to build and repair strong bones. Now, when you have an injury, like my husband was just in a motorcycle accident, broke 3 to 4 ribs, I have him on bone broth right now. So these bones that are like moving back and forth like this every time he breathes, they're like little ants that want to form a bridge. They're going to be coming across, and they're going to be forming this lattice work. And then the minerals and stuff in the foods is going to go in and start rebuilding those bones. So real important when you have injuries, and if you're in a catastrophe or any of those kinds of things. I mean, getting back on your feet is very important as soon as you can. You can get powdered bone broths. I personally am not a fan of them, because to me, they've taken out some of the healthy fats, and if you take out fats out of your diet, it's the least healthiest diet you can be on, is a low-fat diet. Because if you're eating just salads and you're not adding any fat to any of those things, the nutrients that you're eating, they're only pre-vitamins. A lot of people don't know that. It takes your fat-soluble vitamins for you to be able to absorb those pre-vitamins and turn them into vitamins. And a lot of people don't know that. So you always want to have healthy fats, and those are like your avocados, your coconut oil, your olive oil, your flaxseed oil, your grapeseed oil. You want to stay away from shortening. Some people like canola oil. I'm not a fan of it. And the reason is because in some countries they use it as an industrial oil. And it does have some issues with it and how they process it. So some people will store it and some people use it, but I'm not a fan of it. So I'll just let you guys do your own research and figure out what you guys feel comfortable with. So there's these protein sugars, and they are needed for healthy joints. And so this bone broth has all these protein sugars in it. So they keep your joints lubricated and your body moving so that you can move and you're not stiffening up in your old age. So, and then it's really good for building your immune system. So, just real basic on how you make bone broth. Yes.
How long would you say that would be shelf stable if you canned it? Like,
Well,
at
it's
least-
kind of like a meat product.
Right.
So
So
they say
3 years?
when you're canning meats, you want to rotate it about at least every 3 years to 5 years.
Okay.
So I would say I would go with that.
Okay.
One way you can tell you have a good broth is when you, because what I'll do is I'll make my broth, let it cool, and I put it in the refrigerator. And then those unhealthy cholesterol thing, I just pop off the top. And then if you jiggle it and it's like a really thick jello, you know you have a premium bone broth, because that's all that collagen and everything that you just made in this wonderful bone broth. So when you're making a good bone broth, you can be using, like for chicken, you can go down to the Rancho market, that Asian market in Temecula, and you can get chicken feet. I never thought in a million years I'd be buying chicken feet. But you can go down, you don't need that many when you're making a big pot, but say you get 3, chicken feet. And then backbones, neck bones, the gizzards, those pieces of the chicken that you typically don't use. Now another thing, when you're boiling a whole chicken for whatever reason, keep the carcass and keep whatever you didn't take off the bones, because all the cartilage and the joints and the meat and nutrition and the bone marrow and all that's in there, you'll just throw that carcass right into your bone broth concoction. And then if you want to, you can add vegetables to it, which I typically do. So I will put in carrots and onions and celery and all that kind of stuff for minerals and mineral salts and all that other stuff. And then you'll boil that up, and you'll do that for 48 hours on a very low heat. And because if it's high, you're going to ruin your bone broth. So you can learn how to do this on YouTube videos. And so then you just strain off all the stuff and put in the refrigerator, pop off the cholesterol, and then I just take and measure 2-cup portions, and I put in Ziploc bags, and I put in the freezer. And when I get too much in my freezer, then I'll just have, next time I make it, I just put in and I start canning it. So you can have some shelf stable. So then the beef, you can go, and it's all the odds and ends that people aren't really eating. It's the backbones, it's the neck bones, it's the hoof. I never thought I'd buy a hoof, but I bought a hoof. And then vegetables and stuff in it, and it'll make a really good bone broth. And when you're making soups and stuff, you can get your carton of bone broth at the store. But if you have some of that homemade bone broth, the real stuff, and you put that in there, it's just amazing how good your soups are. Because when people, like I had company over at Christmas time, and I made homemade chicken soup, and I had a little bit of my chicken broth, bone broth, and I added it just to that box broth at the store. Because the body can tell right away when it's, wow, that's something I'm missing, I'm craving this, and they just loved it. And so
would you add like your 2-cup portion of it to
whatever else I'm making. So bone broth, another one of those superfoods that people are really kind of getting back into right now. Yes.
my mom, used to boil up the chicken and bone the chicken and then freeze the meat and then always save the broth for, she would always cook her whole grain rice in it.
Yeah,
And-
we were
and
just
she
talking
said-
about that.
You guys never knew, but that was cooked in
Uh-huh.
the broth.
Yeah, when you take your rice and you add chicken broth to it, it's amazing. It adds so much flavor. So, what else was I going to say about that? Oh, it'll probably come to me in a few minutes. But bone broth, definitely something that you want to learn about and learn how to do. It's really easy. It's not very time consuming. It's just a matter of very low heat, long periods of time. Just go over and stir every once in a while and you're fine. Okay, any questions about sprouting? There's a lot of different grains. that are ancient grains that people need to kind of experiment with. And there's different things that you can do with them. You can make grain drinks with them. You can sprout with grains. There's just a ton of different things that you can do. And then you have beans. You have your beans that are real important because, you know, they're just a really good source of protein. Especially, you know, you can, for the protein of powder is just pennies compared to going and buying something real expensive, like a meat. So beans are kind of like poor man's meat. But then also, when you get into the beans, you're talking about a plant, a vegetable. It's going to have the vitamins and the minerals and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. And just really kind of get your family used to eating a variety. Now, another thing I want to talk before we leave the rice thing here is we have white rice, and we see that how we, a lot of us store the white rice, but that's a polished rice where it's really been stripped of most of its nutrients. It does still have nutrients in it, but it just doesn't have, you know, what's better, and that's what we're here talking about. Well, how can I upgrade my food storage to something better? The reason why we store the white rice is because it's very low in the oil, so it can be stored for long periods of time, up to 30 years. Brown rice has more oils in it, and so does wild rice, and so they have a much shorter shelf life, some as little as 2 years. And then those I just store in my pantry like this, and then even if I'm cooking my white rice, I will still put in either some brown rice or some wild rice or something just to add that more nutrition into it. Now, another thing that's real important about nutrition is that for the body to grow, for us to remain healthy, for our jawbones to grow correctly, and you go into other countries, even very poor countries like Africa, they have amazing jawbones and they have no cavities. And it's because of the mineral content in their soil. Because your plants are only good as the soil is. And so your best soils are volcanic areas, so they're active, and then ancient seabeds. And so the land in America is very depleted of these minerals. And so we want to be supplementing with minerals and different things. So I'm going to just briefly talk about trace minerals. You can get those. Add those to, you know, your water. You want to do that. You know, having supplements in your diet. This one here is one that I like. It has all the green powders, wheatgrass, barley, spirulina, probiotics. I mean, it's just a nutritional power punch right there.
Is that a pill form?
Capsule.
Okay.
And it's raw. That's another thing.
And the trace minerals look like those were drops?
Yeah, these are actual drops. This is what you kind of put in water. They're clear. Trace minerals are something that you need so little of, but you still need them. So, but again, we're not getting those. Dave has this one here, ocean minerals. What else do we have up here? So just different things. Here's another trace mineral drops that he has up here. So the place that you're going to get the most nutrients is going to be in your vegetable kingdom. Okay? So that's where you want your food storage powerhouse to be. And then, two, when you're eating a healthier lifestyle, when you're looking at your plate, 75% of your plate should come from the vegetable kingdom. And then from there, your proteins, if you're not doing beans or whatever, and your fats and some carbohydrates and whatever. Okay, we need to move on here because this is going like... Oh, I want to talk about spelt. Spelt is also an ancient grain that is also easy to digest than our typical wheat today. And for people who kind of have sensitivities to wheat, they're not into the disease stage, but they sometimes are just not digesting it very well. It's an easier one because there's less gluten in it. Okay, we talked about the mixed grains. Talked about sprouting. Okay, and then we're going to talk about bioavailable breads. And Dave is going to come up here and help me with this a little bit. Because he has put together here, this is called natural yeast. Why don't you explain to them a little bit about this?
Okay, I mean, something as simple as bread, it never dawned on me how important our breads can be. In fact, I want to read from this really excellent book. It's called The Art of Baking with Natural Yeast. It's probably the best book ever written on this topic. Highly recommend that you get this. I'm just going to read a little bit right out of the book. Most people don't know that grocery store yeast is not a naturally occurring substance. So you can get the grocery store yeast in the block form. You can also get the more quick acting active yeasts in the stores like this, this is all the yeast that's used right now in breads, in commercial breads. And you can get that. Let's see. Grocery store yeast is not a naturally occurring substance. Since 1984, the vast majority of yeast has been man-made and laboratory created, okay? This means that for the first time in 6,000 years, humans are eating bread that is not made with natural yeast. Some people are now beginning to ask if this synthetic yeast is making us sick. Commercial yeast was created to be fast and called quick or fast rise yeast. In fact, the quick yeast produced for store-bought brands is so foreign to our digestive systems that some people develop allergies to the yeast itself. Sure, it frees up the schedule a bit, but when you consider that every culture across the globe has been using the same system for thousands of years, you have to wonder whether throwing that tried and true system out the window is considered progress. Natural yeast has several health benefits that you can get from the instant yeast that you can't get from this instant yeast. Natural yeast breaks down harmful enzymes in grains. Natural yeast takes the nutrition in grains, the vitamins and minerals our bodies crave, and makes them easily available for digestion. And then also, natural yeast converts dough into digestible food that will not spike your body's defenses. It pre-digests sugars for diabetics, breaks down gluten for the intolerant, and turns calcium leaching phytic acid into a cancer-fighting antioxidant. When I read that, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe that bread was an anti-cancer thing if you used natural yeast, which has been done for thousands and thousands of years. Yeast is found on all types of things. That it's in the air, it's in our breath, it's on plants. Where you might most commonly notice it is on grapes. If you see that little white film around grapes, that's natural yeast. So a lot of times when people will start a natural yeast, they'll actually throw a few grapes into it or some type of fruit that they know has yeast growing on it. That's not necessarily necessary to start a natural yeast, but this is what a natural yeast looks like. It's liquidy. It's kind of it looks like a dough, okay? And there's 2 or 3 different brands here that we've got. They come from 2 or 3 different areas, but the bottom line is if you wanted to start it from scratch, you just take some grain, maybe throw a grape in there. I'm going to just refer you to this book and to the internet on how to make natural yeast from scratch. But once you get it going and you get about this amount, you have to feed it because it's a growing live thing. Okay?
And you feed it by putting more of the
You
flour
feed it
in
by
every
putting,
day.
for example, if you had a cup of this natural yeast, about once or twice a week, you would feed it with a cup of water and a cup of flour. Okay, a little bit a heaping cup of flour and a cup of water. You mix it up, and you can stick it in your fridge, or you can actually leave it out on the counter. It starts producing or growing more quickly when it's warmer out on the counter.
So is it fermenting?
Basically, it is. Yes.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah, it's basically fermenting, and you'll start seeing bubbles growing on this. it's kind of an art. You have to read about it and experiment with it. You're gonna mess up a lot, but if you just stick with it, it's great. And then there's plenty of recipes that show you that instead of pouring this or this in, you're gonna pour like a cup of this in, and it's the process that's going to rise the bread. But again, when I found out that it actually made the minerals and the vitamins more bioavailable to your body, actually made it more available, and it fights cancer and things of this nature, and for the gluten intolerant and those with celiac disease, there's actually testimonials in here of people that once they use this yeast, they can eat bread again, those that had to completely cut it out of their lives. And so it's actually fascinating. In fact, I think the Whittiers have testimonials on that, right?
We have done this.
You guys have done that, right?
Yeah. One thing I can say is I wasn't super successful starting from scratch
Right,
creating.
right.
So I always would go on Amazon and get a yeast starter, a natural yeast.
That's what I would
starter.
suggest. I tried starting it from
To
scratch and
begin
it was
with,
almost impossible.
It is. If you feel like you have this other child to take care of
Right.
initially, you know.
I'm totally with you. I tried it. So, for example, this one says,
But it can be done.
yeah. This one says Alaska on it. That it's just it's some starter yeast that was bought from Alaska that somebody's been. Some of these yeasts go back to pioneer days, 200 years old. You just keep growing it and growing it, growing it. This one right here is from Azure Standard. And by the way, that's a company you definitely want to look into. Azure Standard. They have so many amazing organic things and almost every kind of product you can imagine, every kind of bean or wheat or rice or whatever. So this is, I really can't emphasize this enough. If somebody's suffering from these intolerances and things, I think this is actually an answer to a lot of the problem. That these things started in earnest in the 80s, after about 30 or 40 years of commercial yeast making its way into the system, into society, and into people's bodies. I'm not saying it's the sole culprit of these things, but I'm sure it's a great contributor. So,
Well, thank you. Any other questions on that?
just get this book. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The one thing I wanted to add to that says, even after the bread is baked, spores reach out and good bacteria begin to grow within the loaf. That's amazing. Because that good bacteria is what we want in our digestive system. And then they're the ones that break down a lot of the stuff that we're trying to absorb. And that doesn't occur in the store-bought bread at all. So, this natural yeast, it helps maintain good healthy food absorption. It keeps your blood sugar levels where they need to be. It boosts your immune system. Gluten has been broken down. It contains healthy bacteria, helps in the prevention of diabetes because the insulin index has been lowered. It controls candida. It helps recover poor digestion, increases in nutritional value over a period of days because of the spores in it. You know, it's adding to it as it's sitting there. It contains antifungal properties, decreases gluten intolerance. It digests better than other breads, aids in digestion of other high carbohydrate foods when you're eating this bread with it, and the most beneficial bread option for overall good health, and it's in harmony with nature. So this is one area that I know I want to kind of start to learn how to do. I'm glad to see that some people have already done that, including Dave and Pam. Okay, so in this book, you know, too, if you were to get this book, she has the recipes for all this stuff in here as well. So it's a really good book to get.
Is that Claudia Orgel?
Yes, this is
Okay.
Claudia Orgel's book. Okay, so next we want to talk about honey. Okay, we have honey and our sugars kind of through here. There was one of the apostles, it was kind of a way back, probably 30 years ago, that he was a survivor of World War II, and he talked about honey, and that it traded or bartered as a value of 3 times more than sugar. And the reason is because of the nutrients that are in the honey and the medicinal properties of honey, where sugar has no nutrients at all. It's just a sweetener. So having good variety, people have sugar in their food storage, but also to have things that are actually giving us nutrients. So speaking of honey, what do I have here? He has his honey. This is a raw honey. Raw honeys are great because you have a lot of enzymes in it. And those raw enzymes are really good for medicinal reasons as well, and for digestion. For people who have allergies, if you're eating your local honey and the bee pollen, that's another thing, then that's going to help desensitize a person to allergies that they're getting in the air where they live. This here is Manuka honey. This comes from New Zealand, and these bees are feeding off of the flowers of the tea tree. And this honey is what you call medicinal honey. And so I have this on here. You have a good quality when they have these numbers right here, and then they have the lot number and the expiration date on it. And they have active on this one 15 plus, and you can get it up to, I think I have one at home that's like 20 something, 25. So the bigger the number, the more of the medicinal quality of the Manuka honey is. It's definitely more expensive. You don't want to take any more than a tablespoon at a time because it's just so potent. They tell you it's not a good idea to take any more than that. So
Where do you buy that, Vicki?
I got this one over at Sprouts, and you can order it online. But for something like this, it can be like $25. But you don't need that much.
Right.
But when my kids get sick, this is the honey that I go to, and you can make, healthy drinks for when they have cough and colds. So I will take warm water, nothing too hot, just pleasantly warm, with a tablespoon of this raw honey and raw apple cider vinegar. That's what this here is. And you mix it all in, so it's all mixed in, and they just sip it and drink it, and within 10-15 minutes they're not coughing anymore and they can sleep through the night. But the key is that you're not allergic to honey. So if you're allergic to honey, I wouldn't recommend that. Then another sugar that you can add is blackstrap molasses. This is unsulfured, so it's not processed and stripped and all the other stuff. This has, good iron sources with other minerals. When I make my homemade bread, I actually put a teaspoon or a tablespoon of blackstrap molasses in, again, just to boost that bread nutrition up. And so this is another thing that lasts a long time on your shelf. And so I store this.
Can I show them this?
Yes.
Since you're on the topic.
Yeah.
This is a 5-gallon container with honey in it. Okay? I wanted to bring this to show you that you can store this in large quantities if you want to, and honey shelf life is indefinite. It never goes bad. So this is a way to store your sweets or whatever you use it for.
But the live
Forever.
enzymes that are in the
And this is
honey
raw.
prevent it from molding or having anything grow in it that it shouldn't.
When it hardens and crystallizes, how, in a large container like that, how do you break it down and make it usable?
Yeah, actually, when I opened it up today, it was probably that thick of crystallization on the top, pretty hard. And I just started mashing it up and stirring it up, and it's all just back in, it all goes back to that form again. Or you
You don't
can,
have to heat it?
you can warm it, but you don't necessarily have to, if you work
If
it
you
hard.
warm it, it'll recrystallize very quickly on the shelf.
If you warm it,
It does, I do it all the time.
yeah.
Mostly you just scrape the chunk out, mix it with butter and eat your toast.
I mean, but what a beautiful
Do that for
thing.
decades.
It's endless, you can keep it forever.
Mhm.
So.
So it just turns into hard candy. So, but yeah, honey is good in many ways. So instead of just going and storing sugar, you want to have honey, but a lot of the honeys have high fructose corn syrup in it. I mean, they're really being deceptive in the stores. So getting a good honey from a local honeybee man who has his own honey that's reputable and you can tell when you have a good honey. I think the best honey I've ever had, medicinally wise, was honey that still had the bee legs in it, and I mean, it was not filtered at all. But I'll tell you, when we got sick, you know, it took care of business. And I could never track that guy down again after that. But having honey on hand is awesome. Then we're going to talk about oils here really quick because we're running out of time. My favorite is this Tropical Traditions Expeller Pressed Coconut Oil. And when you get on the site, it's been a while since I've been on, I hope they still have it on. There's a video how they do it by hand the old-fashioned way. It's not even done by machines. And so a lot of the nutrition is so littly processed that it's all in here. And the other thing I like about this one is that they've steamed it to take the scent and the taste out. But this is the best quality I have ever come across. I've tried a lot of different ones, but they start turning rancid. They're just not that good. And I have one 5-gallon bucket that I've opened up recently that I've had for like 6 years, and that's what I filled this up with because this is what I keep in my pantry, and it's still as good as a day as when I bought it. And the great thing about coconut oil, it's a high tolerant heat oil. So this is what you want to be sauteing in. You don't want to be using a cold pressed oil. Like you see some of these chefs, they'll use olive oil. And the reason it's cold pressed is because the heat breaks the fatty acid chains that makes it a trans fat. So you want these kind of oils for if you're making salad dressings or if you're just dipping bread or whatever. But if you want to be cooking, sauteing, baking, the coconut oil is one of my favorites. Now another thing is butter. Now this one here I really like. I've learned about it just recently. And this is called Kerrygold butter. And when you get into learning about nutrition, the grass-fed animals have so much more nutrition in their bodies and in the products that we make, like milk and all the dairy stuff and butter. But there's one ingredient in here that you won't find in any other animals except grass-fed animals. It's called vitamin K2. Vitamin K1 is what we need for blood clotting. But vitamin K2 is the vehicle that the body needs when we are eating calcium, that it's taking the calcium and driving it to the teeth and to the bones, not the soft tissues in our joints for arthritis and our brains and plaques and Alzheimer's or kidney stones. So really, this is really not that much more expensive than other kind of butters.
Where do you find that?
Winco, it's really everywhere. Sam's
Costco has
Club,
it now.
Costco has it. So they have the cheese, and all that has the vitamin K2 because they are grass-fed animals. So this is a brand that's really, really good to get. So, learning about nutrition so that you can make your best choices and what you're actually bringing into your home, because the lack of nutrition is what causes sickness and disease and our issues with our health. So the more that we know what the better choices are, sometimes they're no more expensive. We just have to know which product they are. Another thing is when we're talking about oils is cod liver oil. If you're going to be taking fish oils, this is the one that I really like for omega-3s. It's really good for your heart and your brain health. But this is a thing that I do around the house. I put sticky notes on everything. And that's what I do here. So I'm reminding myself every time I buy one of these or I'm taking one of these, why am I doing this? Because I just can't keep it all in here. And this one here, it says, a perfect balance of vitamin A and D, which is your fat-soluble vitamins. Take during winter months, supports immune system for mobilizing calcium, protein, and minerals. Grass-fed butter, eggs, and are a great source. Fat-soluble vitamins. 1 teaspoon daily, high vitamin butter oil, grass-fed. So again, having healthy oils for your brain and your heart and whatnot are very important. Any question about oils? Okay. All right. We're just going to move along here. Now, another good oil is grapeseed oil. It's not one that I use a lot of, but one thing that caught my eye in the book here, that it's really good for preventing wrinkling in the skin. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. As we age, we would like to stay youthful as long as we can. Okay, another thing they talk about in here, and I do have some up here, is dehydrated vegetables. So, some people have dehydrators. Just take your produce out of your garden and don't waste anything, but you can buy dehydrated vegetables in bulk, even over at Winco. This is a mix. And again, when you're making soups and stuff, you can just add this extra nutrition to whatever you're making. It could be casseroles, it could be whatever. You just sprinkle some of these in. So having some of that. Another thing I really like, and I've kind of ventured into this one just in the last year, is this seaweed. I just can't stand the taste of it. So I really had a hard time venturing into this one, but I figured out how to sneak it into my diet where I don't even taste it. And that is whenever I'm making soups or stews, that you just take the little sheets in here and you scrunch them all up and make a flake, and you just put them in your soups. Like when I made the homemade soup over Christmas with the bone broth. You can't even taste it. It just looks like, a little bit of seasoning in your soup. But the important thing is, it's the iodine. And so many people are deficient in the iodine. And the thing about the iodine is, when you're on the periodic table, is that a lot of toxic chemicals are in that same column as iodine. And when you're deficient, and all the cells have these receptors for different nutrients, and you don't have enough iodine, it's going to take in aluminum and barium and all these heavy toxic metals, and you're going to be toxic. So as you start increasing your iodine, you can take iodine supplements. I like it to get it from nature. You can kind of have a cleansing reaction, because your body might get a little bit of a headache, or just like little tiny moments of like a little bit of nausea. You know that your body's detoxing some of those heavy metals. So you don't want to be deficient.
What's the brand on that?
This one you just find at the store all the time. It's Gimme Organic. So that's another really good powerhouse for vitamins and minerals and all those things that are in the seaweed as well. Okay, salt. We want to talk about salt. Where's my salt? Oh, here it is. Okay, so you have your strip salt that's just sodium, and then they'll put some synthetic iodine in it, and they want you to think that's healthy. That's not a natural salt. That's not a salt that your body is supposed to be taking in. You need to be taking in natural sea salts. This one here is called real salt. It comes from an ancient seabed that was covered up by volcanic ash millions of years ago, and it's being mined out of Utah. And it has all the trace minerals, and it is a natural salt. And it's kind of pink in color. And the difference between this salt and just your Morton salt is, when you eat Morton salt, you'll get squishy. You'll feel it in your hands and your ankles. When you're eating a real salt, you will not have that same effect. Another one is the Himalayan salt and South Lake salt. These are all your natural sea salts. And you can get the Himalayan actually in bulk over at Winco. And then you can store it in, these kind of buckets like this. Shelf life is indefinite on salt. But it has so many things that you can be using it for. And so let me go through here. Okay, so you need salts for your nervous system. So if you ever get a little twitch in your eye or whatever, you might be kind of out of balance on your salts. So that electrical pulse in your body, you need to have good salts. So It helps in stabilizing your heartbeat, essential for the regulation of your blood pressure. It's vital for the extraction of excess acidity from the cells in the body, particularly the brain cells. Salt is vital for balancing the sugar levels in the blood, and especially that's important for people who are predisposed to diabetes. It's vital for absorption of food particles through the digestive tract. Vital for the clearance of the lungs of mucus and all that phlegm that can get built up in people's. Clearing up the sinuses. It's a natural antihistamine. You need these salts for the prevention of muscle cramps. People who have excessive saliva, they're deficient in natural salts, so they need to increase that. And then salt is absolutely vital in making the structure of bones firm. Osteoporosis is a major way, is a result of salt and water shortage in the body. So again, you need your salts. These no salt diets are not healthy. You just need to have your potassium more than your salts, okay? You need both, but you need to have more potassium. You need 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. That's 7 to 10 cups of vegetables a day. Now, you can do that in salads. You can do it in green smoothies. You can do it in all kinds of ways. There's different things that you can do to help concentrations of really high nutrient foods. Moringa is one of them. Kale, this is a powdered kale. Kale is just another one of those really super nutrient dense foods with all the vitamins and nutrients and phytochemicals and all that kind of stuff in it. I've got a thing in here on moringa. I'll probably come across it and I'll come back again. But again, these things are very high in potassium. Now,
Vicki,
yes,
how do you use the moringa? Do you put it in a smoothie? Do you?
that's where I put it.
Okay.
I just add it to my smoothie. I try to get as much of my greens into my smoothie as I can. Yes.
And the amount of moringa that you have to add is so small.
So small.
But it's very strong tasting, if you just put it in water and drink it, but if you put it in a smoothie.
I think it's only like, is it a half a teaspoon?
Don't deal with it.
It doesn't take very much. So here it is, moringa. Oh, a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. So it's not very much. So you can get this in actually capsules, but you won't get as much unless you get it in the powder form. You can get these little capsule maker things and put it in the capsules if you want. I think Dave has one of those. But, I just hide my greens in my smoothies. And since it's such a little amount, it just doesn't bother. I like my smoothies a little bit greener than some people do, but because I've been working over long periods of time, I can handle it greener. I mean, my rest of my family don't like my smoothies. They like more bananas and more fruit in it than I do. So, but the moringa plant is also known as the tree of life or the miracle tree. And so in these countries where they're so poor, which I think it's like they use the example like in Africa, this tree is just naturally grows in these, arid areas, and this is where they get so much of their nutrition is actually from this moringa. Okay, so it says just 2 to 3 spoonfuls of this moringa leaf powder provides an essential amount of most people's iron, calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin C, and have a far higher levels of reabsorption by the body than traditional multivitamin pills. Of course, a lot of those are synthetic anyway. So you only need like a half a teaspoon, no more than a teaspoon is needed. And this little thing here has 220 servings in it. Do you remember how much that was? Was it like 20?
It's between $10 and $20.
Yeah. and you can get it down at
You can ask for
GMC
that.
or, you know, you can find that around. But again, these are great things to have in your food storage for the vitamins and the minerals and the phyto and all these cancer fighting things, and just start teaching your kids about them so that they get used to hearing all this kind of talk and they can be healthier. Let's see. So this can be added to any food or beverages, and will increase the vitamin, mineral, and protein content. And they suggest in here that the nutritional value will decrease if you add it to anything that's hot. So just don't add it to anything hot. And if it is kind of warm, then they say just before serving, then you can sprinkle it in if you want. So putting it in a smoothie is a pretty good way to take it. Oh, and then they also said for lactating mothers that if you take this, it'll increase their milk for their young. So that's an important thing. Some women have a hard time with that. Oh, and the shelf life is about 2 years after you open it. So if you're going to buy it, just go ahead and use it. Then in here they teach it, you can actually grow your own. The importance of having vitamins and all that stuff in your food storage, I think we've already kind of talked about that. Okay, so then we're going to talk about a little bit about, you know, healthy drinks. I kind of touched on it already. Apple cider vinegar is one of them right here. So you can take like a teaspoon, probably no more than a tablespoon, put it in some water. The problem that a lot of people have is that their stomach, you know, they hear all about this alkaline water that they're supposed to be drinking. That is not what you want to do. Different parts of your body have different pHs, and your stomach is supposed to have a 1 to 3 pH, means it's very acidic. And if you start alkalizing it, the beginning of your whole digestive system is going to crash. So by, you know, people who have acid reflux, it's because they don't have enough acid in their stomach. So you can help that and your digestion simply by putting like a tablespoon, half a teaspoon, whatever you can tolerate, into some water and drink it before a meal. So that's a really good drink. Then when you add the honey to it, and it's really good medicinally for coughs and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so another thing this has is it has a mother in it. And you'll see the cloudy stuff at the bottom. That is what you want. You want to have that cloudy. This brand is the favored one out there. So that's why you see most people, and you can buy this stuff everywhere anymore. And it stores for more than 5 years. So it's another thing that can go very well in your food storage. Now, another thing is aloe vera drink. A lot of people see the bottle. I just don't like to get everything processed. So in my backyard, I was going to bring it tonight, but it was too heavy because of all the rain. I have an aloe vera plant. And I can't even read the name, the biological name for this plant, but it's a certain kind, and I'll spell it for those who are on the internet, but it's ARBORESCENS. It's a certain variety. But this certain variety, when the plant is 5 years of age, has certain chemicals in it that really are strong cancer-fighting elements to the plant. And so, but they have all kinds of nutrition in them. It supports the immune system. It reduces inflammation, improves digestion, lowers cholesterol and blood sugar levels, and boosts the minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, selenium, and potassium. It also has vitamins A, C, E, B1, B2, B3, B6, and B12, and folic acid. Okay, so aloe vera is really good. So when you have one of these aloe vera plants in your backyard, you can just go off, cut off a little leaf, slice it down the side, open it up and scrape the inside out and put it in your smoothie. And you're just getting all that nutrition, all that protection to your body for disease. So that's another really healthy one. Barley water, that's another one. It contains a lot of vitamin B complex, iron, calcium, magnesium, I'm not even saying that right. There's magnesium and manganese, there we go. Psyllium, zinc, copper, protein, amino acids, dietary fiber, beta-glucans, and various antioxidants. And how you do that is you just boil the barley, and then you pour off all that water on the top, and there's your barley drink. You can add stuff like lemon juice, a little bit of sugar, a little honey if you want to sweeten it or whatever. But that's another one that is really good with all those kind of vitamins and stuff. They say it's really good for people who have insomnia, I think it is. Okay, you can also make what's called Rejuvilac. And I've seen this kind of in the stores, but I haven't really bought their brand. I have made my own, and it's kind of tricky. But you take your wheat, and you'll sprout it a little bit, and then you'll put the sprouts at the bottom of a large glass container. Always has to be glass, by the way. And then you pour water in it, and you leave it on the counter. And over 3 or 4 days, it starts growing all these probiotics. But it's really temperature sensitive, and if it gets just a little too warm in the hot summertime, it'll go, how do I put it? It's a yucky sour smell. And you know that it's not right. So I've had it go bad on me. I don't particularly, it's kind of like a stinky feet smell. That's the kind of smell. So I don't try to do it myself. One thing that I've kind of migrated to with a probiotic drink is this kombucha. And again, it has all kinds of polyphenols and electrolytes and enzymes and your probiotics, everything in this. Again, it's another one that will help prepare your stomach because it's acidic, and so another really good drink. You can get this in a case of 6 at Sam's Club, so it's cheaper to do it that way than buying them separately. This is another thing for people who have maybe a friend or relative who are trying to break the habit of alcohol. You have to give them a substitute. This is the substitute. They love it, and because of all the nutrition, it goes in, it starts healing that liver, which alcohol is destroying. Yes.
Also, my husband for many years wanted to get off Diet Coke, and so that's his new addiction. But he's been completely off Diet Coke, and that just really, fulfills that craving.
Well, and I was reading recently, like if you take a probiotic, I heard there's like, in a probiotic supplement, there's like 60 different bacteria. Where in a cup of kombucha, up to 100 to 150 different types of bacteria. So, it's
This is
powerful.
another thing like the apple cider vinegar that has a mother in it.
Yes.
And you just can't reduplicate what nature does. And there's things probably in it that they haven't even discovered what it is yet.
So what does it taste like?
It's
I've
kind
seen
of,
it, but I'm like, I dare try it, I don't know.
I would say just try
It's
it.
an acquired taste.
This is my,
You get addicted.
I like the ginger ale one, but I wouldn't go with the green one. I don't like the green one because it tastes
I
green.
didn't know there was.
But
I've seen
there's
it,
a
but
berry and there's different ones. But this is my favorite, and this is most popular because this is the only one you're gonna find in the
what's
bulk.
flavor?
This is called ginger ale.
Ginger.
And so it's kind of vinegary, I guess, a little bit. Would you say that? But it's fizzy. It's kind of like a soda. I don't know. I love it. So I finally
It has a
converted my husband.
fermented- I mean, you definitely have that undertone of fermented a little.
Yes, yes.
It's
It has definitely the
bubbly.
fizz and everything to it. Now we're talking about soda and trying to get off soda. This is another thing that you can do. This here is a really good mineral water. You can get this over at Barron's. You can get other ones, and the only mineral they have in is calcium. Again, it's trace minerals we're talking about here. We're not talking about tons. Again, I put sticky notes on everything. Yeah, so this here, if you see the name, you can go to the company, and on YouTube, they tell you all about it, where it comes from in Germany, about how it comes from a volcanic area where it comes up through the ground, the spring, so it's full of dolomite, calcium, and magnesium. And it all comes from underground where it's all pure and everything. So this is a really good one for a mineral water here. So when you're trying to break a habit of soda, because soda is so destructive to your health. I mean, all that potassium, if you've eaten vegetables or if you're eating green smoothies and you think you're doing great, one soda can just, there goes all your potassium out your body. Okay, so you really don't want to undo what you've been trying to do. So really it's like taking something and replacing with something that's a better. So you can get the mineral water, and then over at Sprouts you can get stevia in liquid form, but they have flavors now. So like this one here is berry, and you can get cola, so if you like your Diet Coke or whatever. You can get lemon, you can get all these different flavors over there, and this little bottle is like $15. And then if you watch, it'll go on sale and you can get it for cheaper. But it'll last a long time because you only need a few drops of it. You don't need very much. And so here you have the fizz like your soda, but it has good things for your body, nothing negative, and then a few drops of whatever flavor you want to do, and there you have your soda. And this is a great alternative. So,
Vicki,
yes.
Back to the kombucha, it can be a little bit on the expensive side. I mean, even
Yes,
if I
it can
have
be.
it is so easy to make yourself too. I mean, once
That's
you
a
decide.
class I want to go to.
She's an expert.
Okay.
But you might want to
They're
test
very
and
cheap.
see, I mean, pennies compared to,
Oh, yeah, I am sure. It's just
Yeah.
I haven't ever learned how to make it, so
yeah.
we are going to get together.
Much easier than sourdough.
That's awesome. But I do like it. Now, the other thing is I keep the bottles because they're great water bottles. Plastics, again, we talked about estrogens. You get all kinds of estrogens leached into your water and plastic, so I really try to get away from as much plastic as I can. Okay, we're going to just kind of go along here. Talked about green drinks. There's all kinds of, whenever I go down to Sprouts, I head to the juice bar and I'll get their all green juice drink, and I'll get some wheatgrass juice, and just give myself all that chlorophyll, vitamins, minerals, and it's just that chlorophyll is a really good blood purifier, blood builder. Just amazing what these green drinks can do.